I have spent so much time rendering skin with references, but can I actually render skin? Hell no! Despite all the time I spent, I can't render skin without making it look flat. You'd think just grab a skin tone, decrease the value, and increasing saturation for the shadows, but it doesn't work. Why? Because the skin is fairly complex and isn't just a piece of fabric. Skin is a huge organ made up of 3 layers: the epidermis, aka the outer layer, dermis, blood vessel layer, and fat. Although fat is not important in this case. The light enters through the epidermis and bounces around till it reaches the dermis and bounces off all those blood vessels. Then the light comes out diffused with the original color of the light as well as the color of the vessels. This is called subsurface scattering, or SSS for short. And this is what gives our skin the red hue. This is important because in most lighting scenarios you can see subsurface scattering and can make someone's skin feel flat to alive. Just look at that right there. Now to take things further, there are places where there are more blood vessels, such as hands, feet, knees, cheeks, and ears, which will on average have more of a red hue. In addition, these places will get even more red if there's a blood rush to them, such as being out in the cold or with use. I first start off with rendering skin as spheres. Makes things a whole lot easier than doing a bunch of renderings of the face. For all this, I had referenced different lighting scenarios to be accurate. First skin ball is pale skin with a singular white light. The rendering process is pretty much just a regular sphere, except with skin colors, and on the border of the shadows having SSS. Also, I have no idea how at the time I didn't notice that the shadow is curved, and not even just a little bit, plenty. The second sphere has 2 light sources, a strong blue light and a secondary soft red light. Because the light is blue, there isn't a red hue from SSS, which I was plenty surprised by. I was expecting at least a smidge of a red hue, but alas, it was not there. I rendered everything with blue first, before adding the red light, as the stronger light has stronger shadows, and the secondary light was plastered on the shadows as it is softer. The third is much like the first, except darker skin complexion, but I do believe that the shadow could have used a bit more saturation. It's looking a little too gray. The fourth turned out pretty good because of the subtle warm tone blending with both the base color and shadow colors. Once I was done that day, I had felt that the floating spheres looked a little odd, even though it's practice, but when I did add them, I made the same exact mistake again, and they're curved. I don't know how I managed this. This must be studied. This is an incredibly weird phenomenon of my brain. The next day was more of the same. Due to that, I didn't learn anything with this practice, more so ingraining the information. Still just as important. So that wraps up probably the most important part of skin studying. Although, I'm not well versed enough in skin to say for sure. Later on I might learn that I was completely wrong and there was like 10 bajillion different things that I need to learn. Yeah, actually now that I'm thinking about it, I mean, like, if we're talking about details, and yeah, in terms of detailing skin, yeah, there, but the main basis, I'd say I might be right. Now time to move on to rendering faces, you know, the whole entire reason why I'm doing this. The first is with reference. Right off the bat, I had chosen not to sketch things out, but instead used color blobs to shape the forms like clay. Which, while not my first instance of doing this, but it is my first time using this in a piece that I put more than 5 minutes of effort in, so you know that's first. Good. With each color choice, I had thought deeply about it instead of just picking colors that looked close enough. For example, the red hue around the cheeks are there since it has increased blood flow, or how the light around the edge of the jaw is bounce light. You can see here I decreased the warmth of the skin, as I didn't notice my tablet went on night mode, which makes everything warmer, and my reference wasn't in night mode, so it made my piece look too warm when I was working on it. And when I continued this the next day, I had realized my mistake. Genius activity here. I don't have much else to say, except that I found rendering so much harder on my tablet. Like, why? It's like the same thing as on my computer, except I'm drawing on an actual screen. Make sense? But all that aside, I'm quite proud as it is. It is so vibrant and pretty, with confident and clear brushstrokes. Second phase. I had used the skin sphere rendering to make sure I knew the values and hues beforehand. Although I did use a reference and just applied the values and hues from the sphere, which turned out to be similar to the reference's lighting, I didn't realize that until I was done. And looking at it, how did I not realize that? It's like almost the same thing. Anyways, I started with base colors, separating the strong orange light with the soft blue light. I had given the cheeks and nose more of a red hue due to increased blood vessels, with the addition to the ears, which had even more red hue. I was way less confident with this one, and it's quite clear in my softer brushstrokes, lacking definition and overall short on details. As well as contrast wasn't there in places where it was needed, such as the nostrils or the shadow on her right eyelid. Final note, my hair rendering needs some work. Last one, a zero reference piece. I started with a sketch, and for the first time, instead of doing line art, I just cleaned up the sketch and called it a day. You know, too lazy for the actual line art. Once completed, I made a skin rendering sphere once more to help me. It's quite clear in my base colors that I'm a little confused, more confused than the previous one, as I just plastered orange and gray colors without really conforming to the shape of the face or anything else really. My initial rendering of the orange side is quite good, but it does not illustrate that she is smiling, as her cheeks are too flat and should be rounded, you know, as smiles work. At this point, me being unconfident is making the rendering of the gray light feel muddy and with poor implementation of SSS. At this point, I realize that she needs to have cheeks. Thank goodness. Although I don't quite understand the shape of the cheeks when smiling, so I kept plastering colors until I deluded myself that this result was okay. It was not. The hands were given more of a red hue because it has more blood vessels, and while I don't think it's completely right, I am pretty happy with how it turned out. I move on to the hair, and I have to say, it is so much better. Better use of big shapes, and subtracting, which if you don't know, it is using a color to cut into another color to define its form. The next step was to add smaller strips, and then even smaller strips for details. Surprisingly, better done than the one with reference. At the end, my illusion was over, and I went back to the cheeks and fiddled with that, drawing a grid of the approximate shape and getting nowhere. So that means time to end it, because clearly, I don't know. Which means I need to study expressions at some point. Despite me only spending 6 days on rendering skin, the difference is insane. My rendering was flat, lacking subsurface scattering in multiple places to now having hue shifts throughout. I would have never guessed how important SSS was. So I think it's fair to say that I can somewhat render skin properly now. And with that, this video is over. Dunzo. Finito. Goodbye.